Yeah, that would. Cheryl, can you hear us? Okay. Okay, I think we might want to restate that. Yeah.
I'll repeat, yes. This is Ann. I made a motion to approve resolution number TCFC -2022-02, which approves the SoFi at 6311 apartments transaction.
Second.
Yeah. Joe, can you hear us?
Technology is great.
Yeah.
Cheryl, are you there? Can you hear us? Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you now. I could hear you before.
Okay. So Cheryl, we're voting on this transaction. We have a motion. We have a second from Jamie Faber, and now we're saying all in favor.
I'm so sorry. This connection is really bad. You were going in and out. I know I heard you say that I apologize for doing this remotely. This is not the best way to do this. But I did hear that there was a motion and there was a vote.
Yes, we're voting right now.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. So all in favor of approving this SoFi transaction? Aye.
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 Okay. There we go. Okay. Motion passed. All right, the next resolution, which I assume is TCFC, right, 2022-03.
Yes.
Is to approve the resolution, including Blue Departments in partnership with Elmington Capital Group to be located off Texas 130 on Rockford Range Trail, authorizing the negotiation and execution of the term sheet and other matters in connection.
Yes, Mr. Arnett again.
So this particular transaction, for some of the previous board members, this was a bond transaction which we introduced a resolution on. And it is unlikely that this transaction will be able to access bonds in 4% just because of the lottery and the lottery number that they've got. In all the transactions that we did do the bond at 4%, because the uncertainty of the availability of bonds for allocation, we have gone back to each one of the developers and asked them if they wanted to do a PFC structure. This is one of these cases. These developers put these properties under contract. They pay a certain amount of money to continue to hold the property. They advance money for plans, etc. This is a very large transaction. As I indicated in the background, we have already done or in the process of doing 2 bond transactions with this group, and we sponsored 2 more in the bonds. This one will go as a PFC structure. I've outlined the fees related to it. This is an MOU that kind of outlines the pricing that we're to receive on the transaction. They wanted to see this as they move forward and spend more money and actually put another $250,000 down on the contract to extend it. So these are the basic terms. There are a few other things that we need to negotiate, such as the back end exit. But this is an outline of what we have discussed, and I'm making a recommendation that we approve this resolution and move forward with the memorandum of understanding of these terms.
I just have a question about the ground lease fee. Can you tell me how that structure works? Is that in perpetuity? How does that work?
Well, perpetuity, as long as the lease is in place, and typically it's either 75 to 99 years. And so, yes, on an annual basis, that is how much we will receive in a ground lease.
Thank you.
No, I'm happy to see that the contribution to the set aside is no different.
Do we have a motion to approve resolution TCFC 2023?
Okay.
All in favor? Aye.
Cheryl, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. And I heard the motion.
Okay, so we're voting now. Cheryl, can you hear us? We're voting now. So we have a motion, we have a second, all in favor.
Okay.
We're gonna need to.
Yes,
She's gonna need to turn on the
And
video.
Cheryl, can you turn on your video? We're going to need to be able to see you. Are you in a place where you can show your video?
Yes, hold on a second.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, can you see me? Yes, so I'm in favor.
We just have to minimize this.
Okay. Okay. And so Cheryl, you said you voted in favor?
Yes.
Okay. So the Motion passed. All right, I think that's it for action items. Moving on to the regular agenda. Item A, existing affordable multifamily development partnership. That's back to Mr. Onion.
Good morning, members. Keep Power Asset Manager. Quick update on Tech Ridge Apartments. We are at, as of the end of the April draw, we are at 78% completion. Again, this is a 311 unit development at I-35 at Tech Ridge Boulevard. If you're heading north out of Austin, it looks like you're going to drive right into it. I encourage any of you that have time to go out there and take a look. There's still plenty of work to be done, but it's in a form now where you can get a very good idea for how it's going to appear. So progress is moving along, and completion is anticipated to be in early 23. First apartments, we just had an action on home battle. So I won't belabor that point. Lamar Koenig, this is a property that we are working with Cambrian Development. It's 2.5 acres with 163 units, affordable at 80% of area median income. Total number of units is 258. As we have been negotiating in the past, the set aside units will have rents that are at least $200 below monthly market rent. And at this time, they are applying for financing through FHA, and so that's a little bit time consuming. They're in that process right now.
So the next one that I want to talk about is Casey Bridge. And it is a transaction that was approved in a memorandum of understanding back in February. So what I want to do is bring the board up to date on what is happening with this particular transaction. I've given you the background, and this is really what was presented back in February as we were moving forward. However, the second page talks about new revised recommendations. And basically what it says is, I do not recommend going forward with this particular transaction. Just some history on this. This is a different bond structure than we have ever done before. In this particular case, we would own the property 100%, and the developer would just be a contract developer. They are accessing affordability unlocked in order to get a greater density. The issue that we ran into is that as we were moving forward, it is clear when you read the city of Austin's requirements for affordability unlocked, that if you access their funds, they also require that you do the RHDA lease agreement. What is not clear is that even if you don't access those funds, you still are required to do that. And it's so not clear that we actually had to have our attorney take a look at it and determine that, yes, in fact, it does infer that you have to do that. The issue again on this structure is that it's highly leveraged because it's completely financed by essential purpose bonds. And given the fact that we don't know how the property will operate with this lease addendum, and once we found that out to be the case, that we actually just put this transaction on hold. And so that's where we are with of transactions that we had did not permit us to give you an update like this, but wanted to bring that to your attention. This is something probably we need to have Jim Plummer come back whenever his schedule would permit to explain the difference in these structures. And we did have him come the first of the year to discuss this new structure. And he explained, how it all lays out. However, that was not in the presence of the board members. And so just want to bring you up to date that that's where we are at with this particular transaction. And so if you all have any questions with regard to that.
Remind me, what is objectionable about the lease agreement?
What is objectionable about the
I mean,
RHDA
unless I
lease?
misheard you, we are not doing it partly because of the requirement of.
Right, okay. So there are a number of things within the RHDA lease addendum which makes it extremely difficult to remove anybody in the form of terminating them or evicting them. And it's a long protracted period to do that. Typical property managers, they don't want to get rid of anybody. If somebody hasn't paid rent, et cetera, they work out a payment plan, et cetera. This is an extreme situation that even though they don't pay and they're not willing to come up with a payment plan, it's still a long protracted period in which to give them out. What that does from an underwriting standpoint is that you're going to have to put in additional amounts for loss reserve for rents because it's anticipated that it's going to take much longer. And so you're going to have a loss of rent anywhere from 6 to 8 months on each individual. So from an underwriting standpoint, you're going to have to discount the amount of rents that are projected. And then on the expense side, you're going to have a lot of legal fees as a result of working through that process. But probably the most difficult to address is on the RHED lease addendum. It talks about if the property has any damage to the unit where the tenant can no longer occupy the unit, that you are responsible for relocating them, paying for that cost, however long it takes to get that accomplished, and then guarantee that you'll put the resident back in that unit. If for some reason you're unable to make the repairs for whatever reason you can't recondition the property, then you're required to pay for their relocation for a 42-month period. Why this is problematic, we simply just need to look at the issue that we have with Rosemont at Oak Valley and the issues that we had there and the amount of money we've spent just to relocate the residents, their belongings, the extended period of time to rehab the units, et cetera, and we're somewhere around $1.8 million. That is something that is very difficult to underwrite and is meeting with a lot of objections from people that are thinking about accessing that.
So when you were saying, the anticipated losses around being unable to evict people, and I thought I heard you say 6 to 8 months per resident, if that's your estimate.
Yes.
So you're assuming that all residents would be in default and you would have to pay 6 to 8 months. I want to understand. That seems very high.
Because of the long protracted period, it can be as much as 6 to 8 months. And what I'm including is the fact that you go before a judge to do the eviction process. They can also delay that process.
Right. No, my question is more, I get that. I don't know how evictions work, but my question is, when you're doing the numbers for the underwriting, you're anticipating that every single resident will have that. That's sort of your worst case scenario. That's what I heard. Every single resident will need to be evicted. Every single tenant.
No, ma'am. The problem in underwriting, if you don't know the extent of that issue, and until a piece of property is operating under these circumstances, you really have no historic data in which to indicate just what your exposure is going to be. And so, quite frankly, lenders look at that and they take a very conservative approach with regard to that.
So do they estimate it? Not, I'm hearing it's not 100%, or they estimate 80% of tenants, 50% of tenants. It just seems like catastrophizing in advance. You know, you kind of say all these people are going to default, and I'm just
I'm just saying how a lender looks at it on a very conservative approach, and then not having historic data on which to say how many people would fall in that category. They're going to take a very conservative approach, and they're going to include a certain amount of loss reserve with regard to that.
okay. So what I'm hearing is it's negative on us from the lender's perspective.
Mhm.
Okay. And then, but I would also say that the kind of thing that you're talking about, and I haven't looked at the lease, but based on your description, a lot of communities put things like this in place to prevent evictions, to prevent homelessness. And so I think we have to balance the, the competing priorities there. And, I'm wondering, you're saying you're putting this particular project on hold because of that lease. Are there other projects that are going to be impacted by the lease addendum? And aren't other people developing with the lease addendum?
And I would say, yes, they are. And the way the RHDA program works is if you go to the city of Austin and you request a certain amount of funds, $3 to $5 million, which represents soft money, the developer looks at that and weighs the fact that I'm taking on a risk here. I'm not really sure the exact outcome of that risk, but I'm receiving $3 to $5 million. And there have been a number of developers that have accessed that because they're receiving $3 to $5 million and just evaluating that risk. What I'm saying now is the way the city of Austin has couched their requirements is even if you don't get that money, you're still going to have to take on this liability. And that's
Just by requesting, just by asking for it.
just by getting
Tricky.
affordability unlocked.
Yes.
And
So, I'm sorry, let me just interject. So everyone doesn't take advantage of affordability unlocked. So, it's obviously a program where you opt into. So, in some cases, you might be developing affordable units without the use of affordability unlocked. And it just all depends on whether you take advantage of that or not. Most do, but typically you see affordability unlocked utilized when you have a market rate unit, they want to increase the density. So they may put in some affordable units, but it's more of a traditional market rate unit who wants to obviously increase their density so that they would maybe take advantage of affordability lots in most cases in order to maximize the potential. So it would depend. Not in every case, but every affordable unit, obviously, but in many cases, potentially. So it's not, I just want to say it's not across the board. Every single affordable housing development would be utilizing affordability a lot.
If I may.
So
Yes, sir.
I'm just going to say, it will require your property manager to be on top of units constantly. You can't wait 2 or 3 years to go in and find out that somebody's dilapidated the building. So it has to be done on a regular basis. So that property manager will have to take some responsibility too. Okay? And is there any liability that we can, as the owner, speak against the property management or something like that occur? Maybe kind of negligent in that.
There's not really any additional liability that can be assessed toward the property management company under this structure that we're aware of, because there's not really a case out there where it's been done. But a property management, you are absolutely correct. A property management company is absolutely going to have to be doing their due diligence on a regular basis, as they should be doing in any case. But I think that from an asset management standpoint, you know, and I certainly understand the vendor's perspective. If you have to look at the possibility of being liable for almost 4 years for someone's lease payment and associated expenses, that's a lot of uncertainty out there. It may not be 42 months, but it could be 24, or it could be 36. And under this structure, Robert, correct me if I'm wrong, under this structure, on this particular deal, we would be the sole owner. So we would have to come up with any money that was not in those reserves. And given the especially given the circumstances that we're in at this time with regard to having to pay out of pocket for repairs for the current property and not knowing when we're going to be reimbursed, to have transactions such as this one with the additional liabilities is from a financial standpoint not a really good position to be in.
Have you been back to the builder developer in a sense to see what type of concessions they can do, or is it just strictly on us?
It is strictly on us, and because we are 100% owners of the property, and really their position is they want to go forward with this transaction because they're strictly going to get paid to build the property, and you have all the liability. So they're all in favor of it. And I basically said, I understand you want to develop, but I may not want to own under this particular structure. And again, the difficulty is if it wasn't so highly leveraged and 100% financed by the bonds, you create a greater risk of, you know, you can't afford the uncertainty of your income. Otherwise, you default on the bonds. If you default on the bonds and you've issued the bonds, that impairs your ability to issue more bonds in the future. And it's the unknown at this point that causes cause for concern and pause. And so we just put this on hold, you know, pending more or better additional data. And again, properties that have agreed to do this have not actually stabilized at this point. So there really is not anything that historically that you can look at and say, well, this is how they're operating with this lease addendum attached to it. And quite frankly, I have talked to a national developer who has accessed this and has gone to a point where they're close to stabilization. He said, Robert, please don't use my name, but I will say that we probably will not do this again. It did not work out well for us. And in that particular case, they did receive funds, additional soft funds in order to comply with that. And so, in fact, they're the ones that told me, said, hey, just because you're not getting funds from City of Austin doesn't mean you don't have to meet this requirement. And I said, no, that's not the way it reads. And they said, yeah, you better check that out. So we did and found that out to be the case. So anyway.
I think it would be useful at some point, and I think this is something that staff could do, is to take a look at other communities where eviction prevention sort of provisions like this have been in place, and look at the history of how the, you know, how property performs under those conditions, rather than, you know, and because what we don't want to do is establish a precedent that we will deal with this at all, right? We want to continue to grow and develop things. And, you know, I trust you guys to do that, but
I was saying, in the interest of time, maybe we could just bring back some more
Okay.
data for you all, and maybe even have a real estate committee meeting just to do a little more of a deep dive. Obviously, there's a lot of questions, so maybe we could just provide you some more information.
I think that's right.
All right.
Okay. Did we move on to item B under regular agenda? Finish that item?
Do we need a motion?
No, we're
no,
not.
no.
We're still on it. And there's some folks sign up to speak for item B.
Item B. Okay. Do we want to?
Want me to start with
Yeah.
Real Street? So Real Street is a very unique transaction that's been presented to us. I think we've had 2 Zoom call meetings at this point with regards to what is being proposed. And basically what it is about 2.02 acres located on Real Street, which is east of 35 on MLK and just west of Airport Boulevard. What makes this unique is it's a combination of a for-profit developer building 230 units at this point and 60 units that is being done under family elder care, which is at least at 30% of area median income and deeply affordable. The way this structure is working is that the for-profit developer is agreeing to contribute, if they receive the property tax exemption, approximately 0.55 acres of land for the 60 units to be developed. So they're contributing that. It is estimated that that contribution is worth about $3 million. And then, so you have 2 separate entities in combination meeting the requirement under the PFC to have 50% units at 80. The issue that's a little bit different about PFC deal is that the taxing entity provides the property tax exemption if you meet that requirement. And so you have to prove up every year that you have at least 50% of units at 80% of area income. That has not been discussed with the taxing entity at this point, and that's certainly something that needs to be done. Whether or not they say both of them need to come out of the ground at the same time is yet to be determined. I think the structure is very different in that it's being proposed that the fees that normally we would receive under a PFC transaction not come to us at all, and that it be transferred over to the entity that is building the 60 units, and those funds would be used to provide support services on an ongoing basis to those 60 units. There is a lot to still work out with regard to this transaction. I am more concerned not with the 60 units, and it's a unique concept, and I understand it, and we're trying to reach down and do deeply affordable. I'm more concerned about the for-profit entity and how that transaction is going to work. And some of the fees have been negotiated. The back-end fees have not been negotiated with the developer, and we need to do that at this point. And so we still need to negotiate that portion. Provided a map, a site plan But basically it is, whatever fees the proposal is whatever fees that you typically would collect, you're going to forego that. And so that's a big issue for the board to consider. What's also a big issue to consider is that if you are to agree to do this on a one-off basis, you probably have anywhere from 4 to 7 other deals that they would like to do under this same structure. So again, there's a lot to consider. And again, we're at the very early stages with regard to hammering out the back end side with the for-profit development.
So my question, may I? Yeah. From my perspective, it looks like for these kinds of deals, for PFC deals in general, we're pulling off 50% of the fees anyway for the development of deeply affordable units, or support of deeply affordable units. And the way this deal is structured, we're siphoning off all of the fees, right? And I see no problem with that. It's another way for this board to solidify our commitment to the expansion of the number of deeply affordable units in this community.
I believe we have guests to talk about this too. I'd like to hear from them, if that's okay.
Just from here.
That's fine.
Yeah, look, just introduce yourself.
Introduce yourself. You might want to get closer because there might be some people online who might want to hear you. Thank you.
This is your mic here. Okay. Hello, board. I'm Connor Kinney, Capital A Housing. I am the developer for the Travis County Supportive Housing Collaborative, which is made up of 7 nonprofit organizations here in Austin. All of them are supportive housing providers or either housing operators or service providers in one respect or another. And this whole thing got its start with a $50 million investment by the Commissioner's Court in these projects that are now going to bring 548 units of homelessness response housing to the county and the city. And we have a couple of pieces of updated information I'll kind of slip in that are newer, but the gist of this is that we have 3 total sites where we are seeking this partnership because we were tasked by the Commissioner's Court to find land in a hurry and find land that was not on a highway frontage but had access to transit, especially important for these folks. And essentially I cold called several dozen developers and found 4 that were willing to host homelessness response housing on their land. We have since lost 1 of those sites because the process was just taking too long for them and they held up all their development plans while we were trying to make this work. But the basic deal is that the developer is contributing the land for free to the nonprofit, as well as they are willing to give up their entire sales tax deduction, which is really important because it is unrestricted money. And money for services is really hard to come by. So that establishes a bit of a runway for the nonprofits to do that. So we have 3 of these sites. The Family Elder Care Real Street deal is one of them. We have 2 others that are teed up and ready to go. And we come with a little bit more urgency because we have requested an additional $22 million from the city. And the feedback that we've gotten from the city is, well, if this whole thing depends on these PFC partnerships, we really want to see some progress pretty quickly on those. These 3 sites between them would generate 353 units of homelessness response, but then an additional 825 units of just regular affordable housing. It will all be below 80. That the additional affordable will be between kind of 60 and 80. And the nonprofits are essentially helping the for-profit developer achieve their affordability requirements. These will be all affordability unlocked deals, but I've been listening to this discussion, and one thing that I think we have going for us is this truly is a community-wide effort. The city is working very closely with us. I work with a lot of the activists who are behind some of the language in the RHDA addendum, and they are working with us. The city is working with us. We will come up with language that kind of makes it work for everybody. That RHDA language is not in city ordinance. It is something that is able to be kind of customized. And frankly, it's written, I think, with kind of corporate landlords in mind and not the nonprofits that we're dealing with here. So on the fee structure, I had sent y'all a memo, and one of the things that we just wanted to point out is that we have modeled these deals in mind with that 25% of the what would otherwise be taxed to go to the nonprofits to provide these services. These nonprofits, and we have all of them are here either here in person or online. They're available for questions. They are actually incorporating a C3 of their own. It's unprecedented as a collaboration. Their motto is "No project left behind." They have pooled the 50 million and haven't actually signed it yet because they're waiting to see who needs what at the end. And they're working together. It's amazing. They would also like those proceeds from the annual proceeds to be pooled. The annual service budget for all these projects is about 9 million a year. It's significant. And that's about 15,000 per unit, which is pretty standard. These deals could generate a minimum of 1.6 million a year for, which would take a huge chunk out of that, which would mean that's 1.6 million that we don't have to go to the commissioner's court or the city and raise every year for the service contracts. One of the sites contains quite a bit of commercial space, and if we are able to sell the appraisal district on the fact that this is kind of a cohesive thing, because they're talking about requiring their tenants to do hiring preferences for the folks who are living there on site, giving discounts to nonprofits like Dress for Success that help them kind of get established, then it could be actually a couple $1 million more and potentially pay for half of the service costs for perpetuity, which would be amazing. So on the fee structure, beyond that 25%, typically y'all add in the like a 2% fee on the sale of the property, and then as well like a 15% of cash flow. And I just provided that analysis to show that with the donation of the land, the lower MFI level, and even not taking into account a lot of risk that the for-profit developers are taking on, but they're already kind of contributing more than that value. So we just wanted to offer that up. We know that there are transaction costs and compliance costs. I think that everybody involved in these proposals would be fine with some sort of a transaction fee that would cover those costs. Because these are affordability unlocked projects, the city will be auditing annually these projects for their affordability. So they may have less compliance costs than normally, perhaps. And then the two last things. One is that I think the collaborative members are very open to the fees not going directly to the nonprofits, but actually going to HATC, and then HATC might simultaneously, the Facilities Corporation might simultaneously make kind of a long-term grant, long-term commitment for these funds, but that way you still exercise some oversight over the funds. And then the last item is just that the timeline that we're on with the city is that on June 29th, their investment committee is going to meet and talk about the $22 million that we requested. And they have requested significant progress by that time. So we just got this feedback last week. We're kind of in a rush to, and so what we are seeking is preliminary authorization or approval. And by that point, and then the city council will be deciding on their awards in early September. We would love to come back before that point with the actual full details of these agreements worked out. And I would love to come back at that point and just sometime before early September have the definitive agreement signed. So it's a lot of information I've thrown at you. I'm here for questions. The nonprofit folks are here for questions. Whatever we can answer.
One thing that you pointed out was grants, and that sounds interesting. That affordable unlock, that a certain portion of that grant money could handle the problems that Mr. Onion and others have pointed out with regards to eviction and things of that nature. Is that something? And will we still be the owner, basically?
Yes, sir, yeah.
So-
Yeah, the Facilities Corporation.
Yeah, so that structuring a grant just to be out there and, you know, you can just put it in the savings account and build on it, basically, but that's what I see.
Yeah, so we have underwritten all the nonprofit projects at about 30 to 40% MFI for their residents. Because these buildings are debt-free, which the land donation helps accomplish and the city and the county money helps accomplish, the operating costs are way lower. So that's why we can underwrite them at such a low MFI level. We are additionally seeking vouchers and other funding from like HACA and others to the degree that these nonprofit, the intention is to provide this housing without regard to ability to pay. So if we can secure an adequate amount of voucher money, but the annual fee money will go a long way towards defraying that cost, then essentially the nonprofits will not be counting on any rent from any of the units. So that would help significantly with that risk. And then because also they're debt-free, there's no underwriting for the nonprofits. For-profit side, yes, but they say they're comfortable and achievable.
And with the grant.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating structure, and I think it's definitely worth doing. And what I like about what you just said is that having the money come to us and then granting gives us a role rather than just as a passive contributor. And I mean, this is just so innovative for our community. I think we should. My only concern in this meeting today is that we can't take action on it because it's not posted for action. But I would suggest, given the deadline that you have for the end of June, is that we come together and call special board meeting just to endorse the concept so that you have what you need to. If that's the will of the board. But,
Yeah, I think that sounds right. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So the question I have, and this is really what I was going to propose back to the for-profit developer. You know, so there is the component with regard to the property tax exemption, and then there's the sales tax exemption that we can provide with regard to materials for the construction. I don't know if that is going to be something that the nonprofit's going to want to access. I'm certain that the for-profit entity would want to do that. There is an administrative cost associated with that. You know, you've got to sign lien waivers, do the draws, etc. So there's an obligation that we have there. We typically charge $1,500 a unit for that. And I think on the proposal, we're going to give that up as well. So I would like to negotiate that back, at least from the for-profit developer. And then with regard to the 2%, that's upon sale of the property by the for-profit entity. I really haven't discussed what their investment strategy is. Typically, a merchant developer wants to build it 2, stabilize in 3, and sell it in 5. And so they're going to get in and get out. And so their, of course, idea, they're a merchant developer, they want to make money and go on down the road. That would be the only fee that we would retain going forward for a 75-year period. And, you know, we don't have control over when the property sells. It's just when it sells. If they sell their leasehold interest, which means we would stay in the deal and provide a property tax exemption, we could get a fee. That's the only fee that's going to be retained by us. And so very limited fees, everything else is going to somebody else. I understand the concept, but understand that that's what we're doing. And then I understand ×3. So that, of course, when we started with this is this one deal. Now it's 3 deals, but that is the structure. And so that's what I would like to go back and negotiate with the for-profit developer.
I just want to clarify. So what you're saying is the 2% fee estimated wouldn't come in for 5 years when the developer decides to sell. It wouldn't be exacted until then.
Yes, if it's at 5 years. So they,
Correct.
I'm
You're
assuming,
estimating, yeah.
I'm assuming that they would want to exit in year 5.
Okay.
And then also we would want to have approval of who the new entity is going to be that is going to take control of the for-profit side. Understand there's a tremendous risk here in that you got to have both components meeting the requirement of affordability to get the property tax exemption. So they have to be in harmony. And again, that does need to work out. But again, that's what I wanted to propose back. I wanted to throw that out as a possibility. Otherwise, regardless of whether we receive the fees and then grant it, we're not going to get any fees at the end of the day.
Right. But I want us to receive it and grant it so that we have a role.
And that's fine. And all I'm saying is the end result is we're not going to retain any
Right.
fees.
I understand.
It's just going to pass through.
What are your response to this?
I have a pretty good understanding and understand that 2 of the 3 properties are likely to sell within about 5 years. The third is going to be a long-term hold. I think everybody is open to talking about a fee structure that covers costs, right? And it might take a little bit more homework to look at that, and that's something that if we had some direction and maybe that's part of the more detailed homework and negotiation that occurs maybe over the summer. The thing that I'm scared about is that myself and the nonprofits, we don't have any stake in how much the for-profit developer makes on this thing, right? Our only fear is that the deal falls apart. And it's one of the refrains we have is like, we're trying to not be the person who screws everything up, right? I think that that's probably a discussion that needs to happen with the for-profit guys. One of the things that we have been adamant about in our negotiations has been that if the for-profit partner fails to maintain their affordability part of the requirements and the partnership thus terminates, that at that point the land transfers as an ownership to the nonprofit for $0. So at least from the nonprofit's perspective, they have no risk as long as they're not at fault. They walk away with the land. Now that annual fund, which is critical to services, that goes away. Nobody wants that to happen, but there's not an existential risk to the nonprofit. So I guess I would just say that cost of compliance and transaction fee, absolutely. Let's talk about that. How that is structured, maybe that needs a little bit more discussion.
And that's what my concern is. We end up a situation with Rosemont, and I certainly don't want to be over committing us for that. So if we can get some type of grant or something of that nature, so if we have to go into a few, maybe not all of them, but a few of those 42 months situations, it could really cause issues. So that if all of those things can work out, and it seems like it's a deal that we can do. And I'm okay.
Yeah. So I have here we have LifeWorks and a new entry on the line. We have the Urban League and Family Elder Care. All but the Urban League currently operate supportive housing here in Austin. So they're experienced providers. We've built very healthy replacement reserves into the pro formas, and with the Urban League, this is their first project like this, but they've been providing services. There's a lot of knowledge transfer within the collaborative. They've been great about that. And it's also about building the capacity, particularly of our East Side nonprofits that have been neglected over the years and helping them move into, frankly, these groups have not been the ones that have received a lot of public funding over the years. And so a lot of it has been trying to seek equity there and broaden the base of service providers.
Yeah, excuse me if I missed it, but of the 8 million needed for services annually, it sounded like you're about estimable 4 million. What about the other 4 million?
So we're in talks right now with folks from the county and the city about coming up with that funding. A new entry, they provide actually, there's a great, one of these projects is a new entry and the urban league. New entry provides residential substance abuse treatment for primarily folks coming literally off the streets. And then the urban league is going to operate more permanent residential housing, but in a sober oriented environment. So it's supportive for those folks. A new entries model has a contract with Central Health, Integral Care, and others that if we're able to deliver the building debt free and get them their land for free, their per bed contract should cover their operating costs. So we don't yet book that because we don't have those contracts yet, but that is a significant chunk of the service costs. And then because the buildings are debt free, a voucher, like a project-based voucher for a studio apartment will generate about $14,000 a year. Because we are trying to get the buildings debt free, their operating costs are only about $6,000 or $7,000. So if they're able to get full vouchers, they're actually going to be throwing off an extra $7,000 a year that can be applied to services because the services cost $15,000 per year. So it's going to be cobbled together. We're not there yet. What we have done is our worst case scenario is that these buildings will underwrite and work as lightly supported 30-40% MFI units. That's if we get no vouchers, no service contracts. Every dollar that we get in that direction converts those units to zero income without regard to ability to pay, heavily supported. We are kind of banking on that. Each of these projects has been designed from the ground up using trauma-informed architecture. It has a lot of support offices and everything there on site. We're banking on that a little bit, but like I said, it's been a community-wide effort. We're very optimistic.
Thank you. So I think our next step is probably to get together the board, Patrick, to talk about preliminary, authorization.
Okay.
And then there's just some more homework to do on the fees. We'll go from there.
Okay, yeah, so if I may ask, so timeline wise, so the board would probably want to meet to discuss the item and then subsequently approve some sort of agreement, right? And
Bring us the agreement so we can approve. We want to take action.
at the next meeting, you want to take action?
No, I know that's,
Sure.
there'll be more detail later, but I think we want to show our commitment to this community-wide effort. We want to show
Yes.
our enthusiastic
Okay.
participation.
So let me ask Mr. Kenny, what does that look like in terms of what Ms. Benton's referring to?
So when I have looked at the backup of other agreements, I've seen some board resolutions, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is my first time here, but I've seen resolutions that talk about kind of the affordability of the different units. Maybe there's some estimates in there on costs, but then it says we authorize the staff to go and develop full agreements. And I think
So that's essentially all you need.
yes, we would be
Okay.
there, by later this month. And then I think I would figure then that the full detailed agreement would come back at the end of summer.
Okay. All right. So we, sounds good. Thank you. So
You have a potential date in mind? Everybody?
Can we do that in the interest of time?
Yeah,
Can we
let's do
it
that
via email?
afterwards.
yeah, I will pull this out. I will pull it
Thank
off.
you.
I will
Thank
pull
you.
it off.
All
Okay.
right.
Do we have any things or?
Thank you so much.
Certainly, we could have the information on the other two transactions, which we don't have currently.
Over to you immediately. And can I ask, it would be lovely, I don't know if this is regular, when I go back and talk to the city who asks for a response from me by tomorrow, do y'all ever do like a motion to say, let's consider this at our next meeting? Or is there a motion that I can go back and report to the city that says, look, they're gonna take this up?
The board can go on record as saying that there's a general consensus about support, and we can provide some rough notes, you know what I mean, or even the recording of this meeting. If we need something to at least substantiate that there's agreement for ongoing discussions about the item.
We can't, I don't think.
So we
can
don't,
take
right,
that
if
sort
it's
of
not,
action.
if it's not posted, then we don't act, but there
I
could be.
think- I think a letter from staff characterizing the discussion at the meeting. would
All right,
be-
I'll work with you on something.
Awesome.
Yeah,
It'll
and I
be
think
like
it's
rough-
important to
It'll
say.
be rough
we're
minutes, but we
scheduling a
will
board
put
meeting
something, we'll
for
put something.
specific-
Yeah,
I'll put something, we'll put something.
I think that works great.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Are we completed with the regular agenda, item 5, or do we still have pending partnerships? Okay,
I think we're done.
okay, great. Moving on to board and committee reports, we didn't have any committee meetings, right?
No.
If there's anything to discuss, okay. New and unfinished business? Nothing, all right. We have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. adjourn.